Hey there. So here we go with another video. On this one, we're just going to pick up right where we left off on the last one, which was we're outside clock, and we had set up one phase. And we had set up just like the generic phase from the very first video, where both sides are equally loaded out, and each side for its units. So we're looking inside the phase now. And inside it is a control setup, and then the units. And units are laid out. These two probably look new to you. I did a little bit of reorganization since the end of the last video, but really it was just like organizing and grouping things. That's why they're lined up real nicely here. Nothing functional changed. Those are just where the air bases are, like the, like multiplayer air bases. Just let me package them up a little bit. And then we have on both sides an abreast unit, which is like tanks, an air unit, which is both like bombers and fighters, depending on situations, some artillery, and a column unit, which is acting like a support unit. The other side is equivalent, and as they're laid out right now, they are aimed directly at each other, and it just makes a super even battle. They're configured. I did change some of the win-lose configuration settings. I think that is actually that's more narrow in scope than this video, so I'm just going to point it out quickly. It's just that when you have a phase, these are the controls for each of the units in the phase. These are the German units and these are the Russian units. And they have different outputs, and you can use those outputs to set how win and lose conditions are moved towards and away from. You move towards a win condition and move away from a win condition depending on events. And then when the win condition gets triggered, and I just kind of changed what those triggers were a little bit. Then it signals that either the Russians won or the Germans won the phase. And so that's where we're at with this video, is we have a phase. And now we want something else to happen. So like this battle happens and it's dynamic, and honestly, as it is right now, it will sit here and run, even incredibly lame, aimed directly at each other in this little pipeline of battle. It's still pretty interesting. Everything will come out and fight. And so what we really want to do is we want to decide, like, what does our overarching battle want to be like? And we talked about that in the first and second video a little bit for what this is going to be. And this is going to be the Germans are going to be approaching from down here in the southwest up towards Kalak for phase 1. And for phase 2, they're going to be crossing the bridge here and setting up a base here. And for phase 3, they're going to be heading this direction. And the Russians are going to be opposing them at all these phases. And so it's just going to be 3 phases like that. So this one that we have in place already is going to end up representing our German approach. And so what we want to do is we want to add in 2 other phases. And there's 2 ways to go about this here. One is to really start nailing down exactly what you want to do, and start pulling in new phases that are specifically configured. As opposed to this generic configuration like this. And that does have advantages for when you want to do things that are considerably different than the generic setup. But for now, that's more advanced, and that's something that we're going to talk about later. But that is how you would end up setting up like missions that maybe involved you trying to land a plane or have a group of planes land behind enemy lines. Supply trips, observational trips, something like artillery spotting. I haven't thought of how to do that yet, but I'm pretty sure it's doable. Things like that would be things that I'm kind of like discussing with the first way of doing this, where it's a little bit more complex. But for now, we're gonna build our missions based off of this default generic phase, where both sides have a support column, some tanks, some airplanes, and some artillery and some air bases, and that they're equivalent on both sides. And as we go through these videos, we're going to start refining it a little bit, but we're still going to stay to that base core. And that's just so that we don't add the complication of modifying units. That will be for some future videos. But like these units are very modifiable. Okay, that's a good note. Probably longer than I need to go, like most of these videos. Sorry. Anywho, so let's add the other phases. And for real, all we need to do is copy and paste them. So like we have our one. Let's make more. And I don't really care where this one is, so I'm actually going to move it up here a little bit just so like copy and pasting is a little cleaner. Because these are big. They don't really have to take up all the space that they take up, but I don't know, I've kind of balanced between multiple times how like compact to make these little like logic buttons and logic thought things are. But I initially thought in the first like system I built, it had just an insane number of timers, and its storage was persistent. It used a different method of storage. And this one, it actually can't remember anything. All the data just flows through it continuously. And not having to remember anything let me cut out literally every other timer. And It just gave me one less bit to store for every other bit. So, wow, that's probably too many details. But this is taking so long. These copy and paste of big things are just like eternal. Um, I thought that like all that logic, that those timers and activates and deactivates, I mean there were thousands and thousands of them to make the logic system in the previous system work. I didn't think that they really like hurt performance, but I realized after I had really set it up to be very big, in particular one thing I had, which was this like representation of a hash tree that made this very complex decision on how things moved, and decided about stuff, that was just massive. Like it all by itself would save compressed to like 1.5 megs. Um, yeah, I just realized I had to get rid of all that kind of stuff. And this system allows all that to be, well, just half the size. So these missions are small and lean enough. That said, I still think that like adding maybe more than 3 or 4 phases is going to start hurting performance. I also think that adding more than 3 phases is going to hurt stability. Like I found, even though it's the same, like when you have 3 phases running like this, like we're going to do the 3 sections of battle, only one will be active at a time, with just a tiny bit of overlap. And that overlap only happens when a whole bunch of shit is dead. So like it's kind of okay. You'll sometimes still get that like annoying message, but it never gets stuttery, or has any actual effect except for that message. At least not yet. um, yeah. But I think that if you had more than that, it starts getting less stable. When you start having more than 3 phases, it starts to like, it's just too much stuff for the game to think about. It's too much in memory, and I don't know how the underlying system is, but I suspect it's like, um, I suspect it's complicated. I suspect it's complicated because I bet whoever actually wrote the like physicsy stuff, maybe didn't have a whole bunch of experience with programming or didn't communicate with other people. Like those things are just very complicated. Like when I've used really hard math libraries before, they're awkward for a programmer, but they're brilliant generally. And I suspect that this game engine is a bit like that too. I bet the physics is like awkward to program to, but very, very, very brilliant. The way that things move in the game are just so good. Okay, we got everything loaded up. We got our 3 phases. I'm gonna name them to make it be like, kind of clear. Since we're still playing a little bit generic, we're not really sure how we're gonna whittle this down. We're just gonna call it A, B, and C. And on this one, I mean, like I'm really just gonna set these up, like incredibly simply. So I'm just gonna take A, which we have right here. The first thing I'm gonna do, I'm sorry, is actually move our controls together, because that just makes, um, everything better. And so we don't need these. So this is what's going to start it up, and it's going to start up on A, just because I said so. Boom. And then in a little bit, we'll use these to decide how it transitions from one to the next, but we're going to place them first just a bit. So here's A. A I want to be here. Right, so coming up. B, I want to be crossing the bridge. And C, I want to be somewhere in here. Now I want to say that like right now we have this semi-functional already. Here we'll actually set this. There is a caveat, and this is quite important. But if no one does it, or if you don't do it when you're building your own missions, or just take one of these prefab missions and modify it, you'll know really soon, because this is actually something that would just like, it just makes performance crippling. So when you decide to switch phases, so these are the controls for the phases: activate, which I still have poorly named, for activating activating the 3 phases, and then deactivate. For deactivating the 3 phases, and then successes. So for A, if the Russians win, we actually want to go to a win condition straight up. And so I'm just gonna leave that blank right now because I'm not going to show you how win conditions work. But that pushes you to the next mission, and it would be the Russian win mission. So that's another thing to address right now. Is like this is designed with the concept of this entire thing could just progress through missions. So like this Russian win mission could be the next mission. You know, like it could be over here, and the German win mission might be right here at Stalingrad, right? So if at phase A the Germans come in, they manage to win, which they really need to do, then it's going to move forward. And as soon as they do, we're just going to buffer out the next two actions. And this is what's important, is it's that little buffer. It's for just a few, like 50 milliseconds, like really nothing. We're going to buffer out the deactivation of the two units that we won't be going to. So we are going to be leaving the unit that we're in, A, because the Germans just won. And so we'll deactivate A. And then we're going to wait. Here we're going to wait like, I'm going to say 5 minutes actually. And that gives A time for all its units to retreat. If you don't give A time for its units to retreat, then you're going to have just too many units in the mission and you're going to have issues with performance. That's it. So that's like super important. So then we're going to go to B, and this is the bridge and the center mission, and it's often fun to just start in the center mission. How you start it is right here. Is often the most interesting because it's the one where you can go two directions. Yeah, also, both teams feel like, they're in the middle, and I think that it's often going to be pretty cool to have the center mission be like really compressed, like really squeezed tight in. Everybody really fighting tight and very fast. And so we're going to have on this one, if the Russians win, then we're going to end up getting to go push the Germans back to here, back to A. So we deactivate and deactivate. And I'm just always safe about deactivating whichever one I'm not using, Cool. And then if the Germans win, they get to go even further forward to their win condition battle. I think you see a very simple pattern here. Yeah, here's another example of like I'm just copying and pasting two timers, and I have to run through the whole list. So if the Germans win, it's going to be an actual win here, and if the Russians win, then they're going to go back to They're going to go back to the center. And now I'm just looking at these to make sure I didn't do anything dumb, like the dumb thing I just did. Make sure all these guys will end up. So now we really, truly, technically have a mission that is running. It starts, all these things happen. I mean, like, in truth, there's going to be some cars that are driving through lakes. There's going to be some cars that are driving through big rivers. Nothing is positioned. But everything is operating. And it will actually like move through and transition through phases. And so now what you really need to do is just place the units. And since I have really 7 minutes left, I'm going to go ahead and do it. This was pretty fast, which is great. Yeah, so like all that setup and explanation took 13 minutes. It's great. So I kind of like to start with the air bases for where I'm going to be. I'm going to say that the Germans are kind of like where do we want them coming in from? I think we want them to move. Oh, I think because I didn't make the scenery that deep, actually. I can't remember exactly where I put the scenery. Let's have them come right across like this. Let's have them come into right here. And then from here, they're going to come and just barely cross the bridge. So this is what's great, is you get to like really kind of think about it how you want to do it. Like initially you kind of want to shove it right here. But if we have them barely crossing the bridge, then they fight some Russian units here. Like that could be really cool, and then come across. And like maybe this one will, like, the Russian units won't have support. Like maybe they'll just have two tanks, like one on this side and one on that side. And the no support units will hurt them. Like it will make if you don't have support units, it's gonna be harder to keep, depending on how you wire it. Be harder to keep your airplanes being good. And then the final one will be the Germans have a foothold and they're moving. Cool. So like, see, this is gonna have a cool progression. Battle will be here, here, here. shifting back. There's just a little bit of overlap, so that like leftover dregs from a return here can end up fighting over here. And then let's just set it up really quick. And by this, I mean like leaving it as generic as possible, setting it up so that like we don't run into stuff. And we'll set it up really nicely on another mission. Or another video. Everything's a mission, man. So yeah, this is the air base. Like I said, I like to put in the air bases first often. And we'll put them up pretty forward. Fly away from the river into the town. Might want to switch that. And then let's just walk through these and see where there's problems. So like, this support unit is actually okay. It ends right here. The artillery is not. So it needs to move. So we'll just move the artillery up and the tanks up. And see, like this, I'm already kind of positioning things a little bit, but like obviously this isn't like for reals, you know, like, but we'll get there, and soon. And so, and then for the air units, since we come down a little bit with the tanks, and I want the tanks to protect them, is like maybe we'll go a little more like this. And I want the air units, in this case, to kind of push forward. So I think I'm going to kind of cook them and push them. There's a Russian unit. There's my German unit. And so I'm kind of moving the Russians way out of the way because I'm not sure what to do with them exactly yet. I want to look at the German setup. They got tanks, artillery right there, airplanes coming in from up there. That's good cross coverage. And they have a support unit right here. That looks like it's a rail. It is. That's a road. So we'll want to have the support unit ultimately come across this road. I think that it's actually, if I have time, I'm going to do that too. I will. What I'll probably do is I'm going to show you the rest of this one and then do the other two phases off camera and then show it to you in the next video, what they look like. But this lets me show you how to put an on-road, which is quite easy. Column as an on-road. So I move these little dudes wherever you want them. It's there. And then get your units. What I'm doing right now is just putting everything on the ground. It was under the ground because everything, you know, like it has a, you know, a vertical value. So then this lets me line up these. So see, now we're nice and lined up. And then, so on-roads are the one units that take the most work. But it's still actually pretty forgiving. You'll see it when you play with this stuff. What stuff gets hurt and what doesn't. One of the good tricks is if you end up with the column running into itself too often. And by the way, it does like a panic stop if any of the units die. So like see, this is a kind of gross clump, but it should work fine actually, like just fine. And this is also a condition that I'm not entirely sure what I want to do about. Like see how I have all of these separated. It would be nice to be able to move them all at once. This is another one of those areas where like the grouping difference would be good. Yeah, I actually want to push this forward more. Because see, from these, it's going to go immediately to the end. Cool. And so we just set up a situation where the cars are going to move to here and then unload to here, and it's like they're supplying these units here. Here's the supply. And if we got fancy, we could even make a little truck, do a little circle right here or whatever, or exploit the truck that's right here. That's probably what I would use, is exploit these trucks with the artillery. Like you could put artillery here and have the truck move all around this. Cool, so now we actually have a pretty complete setup over here for the Germans, and then the Russians just need their column set up, and they actually need everything set up. So let's get them going. We'll have them do their tanks first. So the German tanks are coming in, and the Russian tanks are going to be defending from, say, let's see, where's going to be our air base? Here, probably. Right? Yeah, we'll be in front of the river. We don't mind having this be a pretty close fight. Nah, it should be pretty far. Let's back it up just a touch. This also puts our air base behind the river, which is kind of fun. Boom. So yeah, I agree. We're going to be a little stretched out on this one. So I think that when we actually build this out, what's going to happen is that the Russian tanks are actually just going to move a longer distance. But right now I'm going to have them be kind of back. Where the German, like, we're just going to spar a bit. They're only going to really hit each other when they're both at their furthest distance. But we'll have our artillery more forward than they do, and thus be considerably better defended. And we'll turn it out too. This is the Russian. Yeah, see, like, it's almost, what am I at, 25? Yeah, like they could actually bomb straight up. So that'll be fun. And then the supply line we'll put in, and we're going to do it just like the other one with like a real supply line. This is obviously cake. We'll take it from just up there somewhere. So we'll have it end like here. Oh, I didn't really set the supply line map on the other one. I'll have to be sure to do that. We'll have it start, like, say here. Shh. Cool. I think you can see how it just works. So yeah, one of the tricks with this is that make sure that the front ones run the shorter routes, because that ensures that the sooner the front one hits, the wider the distance is in the column. That's the rule. Cool. Oh yeah, I forgot to move those guys too. I bet I have to do that for the other one. I'm not going to bother with showing you guys all that, but you get the idea. All I'm doing here really is putting the units out, pieces out, so that they all follow the same path. I kind of just changed my mind and decided to do a whole section at once. I think that is best. Cool, and I'm not going to bother you with the next two. That's just going to be C and D and moving these cars up here. You totally get the idea. I know it. So what we have now is that now we have, as soon as those cars are laid out, is we have a real kind of working system. Like, there's a little supply line that comes in like this, there's tanks that attack like this, and there's an air line that attacks this way for the Germans. And then the Russians have a longer running tank line here, and they have a supply line that comes on in here, and they have airlines that are probably just going to come really long from here to block. So on this one, the Germans are totally going to have the advantage. They are much more likely to win, but the Russians can still push back and win. And then we're going to do exactly that same procedure here, and then that same procedure here. And then after that, we're going to start like thinking about changing what kind of units are involved, maybe specifically moving the A and B units to move in from one pattern and the C and D units to move in from another pattern. And we can just tweak it as we go. Like you can just, advance and advance and advance. And will be functional throughout the entirety of it because of the system that controls it. Next video will probably be a couple days from now, but I'm going to get this up and as a mission running as soon as I can. Okay, have fun.